You just celebrated your 20th birthday. In the modern world, your life is barely getting started. You're thinking about college, your career, or where you want to travel. Your body is at its absolute peak, and barring a freak accident, you can expect to live another 60 years. But if you were born 30,000 years ago, your 20th birthday meant something completely different. It meant you were a senior citizen. If you look around your tribe, you notice something terrifying. Half of the people you were born with are already gone. The children you played with in the river, the teenagers you learned to hunt with, vanished. Skeletons left behind in the dirt. You look down at your own hands. They're scarred, calloused, and weathered. You feel a dull ache in your jaw from a tooth that started throbbing last week. You know with absolute certainty that your time is running out. For the vast majority of human history, the average life expectancy for a human being hovered between 20 and 30 years. Why? Why was the prehistoric world so incredibly efficient at killing our ancestors? We like to imagine that ancient humans were apex predators, dominating their environment with spears and fire. But the archaeological data tells a much darker story. The truth is, our ancestors didn't just die from old age, they were hunted by invisible monsters, crushed by the very animals they tried to eat, and betrayed by their own biology. Let's look at the 4 primal killers that almost wiped our species off the map. To understand the first and most lethal killer, we have to look at an incredible archaeological discovery made in the El Cedrón cave system in northern Spain. Scientists analyzing the fossilized dental plaque of Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens made a shocking discovery. Trapped inside the ancient tartar were the genetic signatures of Salmonella, Streptococcus, and deadly respiratory viruses. Long before humans built cities, we were fighting an active, brutal world war against bacteria. Think about what happens today if you accidentally slice your finger open while cutting an apple. You wash it with soap, slap on some antibiotic ointment, and put on a Band-Aid. By next week, it's gone. But 30,000 years ago, there was no soap. There were no antibiotics. A simple scratch from a jagged rock while butchering an animal, or a puncture wound from a sharp thorn while running through the brush, was a literal roll of the dice with death. Within 48 hours, invisible bacteria would enter the bloodstream. The wound would turn hot, red, and swollen. By day 4, sepsis would set in. Your organs would begin to shut down, your fever would skyrocket, and you would die in shivering agony inside a dark cave. A simple scratch was just as lethal as a saber-toothed cat. But if the invisible killers didn't get you, the meat you needed to survive certainly would. Anthropologists have long been fascinated by the skeletal remains of Neanderthals and early modern humans. When paleopathologists, scientists who study ancient diseases and injuries, examine these bones, they consistently find something bizarre. Almost every adult skeleton shows signs of massive, healed fractures. Broken skulls, shattered forearms, crushed ribs, and misaligned shoulders. For decades, scientists were confused. Why did ancient humans look like they were run over by a truck? Then, a famous study compared the pattern of these ancient bone fractures to a modern group of people. Professional rodeo riders. The image was almost identical. To feed your family, you couldn't shoot a deer from a distance with a rifle. You had to hunt megafauna, massive 2-ton woolly rhinos, giant bison, and wild horses. Your primary weapon was a thrusting spear. This meant you had to get close enough to a terrified, thrashing monster to plunge a stone-tipped stick into its ribs. One wrong step, one slip in the mud, and a bison's hoof would crush your chest cavity. If you survived the initial blow, a broken leg meant you could no longer walk, run, or keep up with a nomadic tribe. In a world without hospitals, a severe orthopedic injury made you dead weight, and the wild has no mercy for those who fall behind.
This brings us to a hidden killer that archaeologists only recently uncovered, one that hid inside the one place ancient humans felt safest, the fireplace. We know that fire saved humanity. It kept us warm, cooked our food, and kept predators at bay, but it carried a devastating, silent price tag. When scientists examine the interior walls of ancient caves, like the Qasem Cave in Israel, they find thick, microscopic layers of laminated soot embedded in the stone. For thousands of years, families huddled deep inside these caves, burning wood for hours on end to stay alive. But caves have terrible ventilation. Our ancestors were essentially living inside a giant chimney. They were breathing in massive quantities of particulate matter, carbon monoxide, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons every single night. When researchers analyze the rib cages of prehistoric skeletons, they frequently find evidence of severe, chronic respiratory illness. Anthropologist Rachel Serrig discovered that even ancient children showed signs of restricted lung development. They traded the immediate danger of being eaten by predators in the dark for the slow, agonizing death of black lung disease by the fire. But the absolute most dangerous day in an ancient human's life was the day they were born. As we discussed earlier in the series, the human evolutionary trade-off of walking upright while developing massive brains created a biological choke point, a narrow birth canal. Without modern obstetrics, sterile environments, or C-sections, childbirth was a terrifying gamble. If a baby was breached, or if its head was slightly too large, it was a double death sentence for both the mother and the infant. Data from surviving hunter-gatherer societies suggests that nearly 1 in 5 women died during their reproductive years due to complications from childbirth. And for the babies that did make it out alive, the gauntlet was just beginning. Before modern sanitation and clean water, the period of weaning, when a toddler transitions from breast milk to solid food and river water, was the deadliest phase of childhood. Their fragile immune systems were bombarded by waterborne parasites and pathogens. If a child developed diarrhea in the wild, dehydration would kill them within days, which is why, statistically, up to 50% of ancient children never made it to their 5th birthday.
When you look at this list of horrors, sepsis from a scratch, crushed bones from bison, toxic smoke in the caves, and the brutal toll of childbirth, it feels like a miracle that the human race survived it all. But this brings us to a beautiful, surprising revelation. In 2020, archaeologists studying a 40,000-year-old Neanderthal site in France found the skeleton of an old man, cataloged as La Chapelle aux Saints I. He had severe arthritis, a deformed hip, and he had lost almost all of his teeth years before he died. He could not hunt. He could not chew his own food. He could barely walk. By all the laws of the wild, he should have died decades earlier, but he lived to a ripe old age. How? Because his tribe cared for him. Someone else scavenged the meat. Someone else mashed up his food so he could swallow it. Someone else carried him when the tribe moved. The very hazards that threaten to destroy us are the reasons we became truly human. The terrifyingly high mortality rate forced our ancestors to develop deep empathy, complex medicine, and unbreakable community bonds. They had to care for the wounded because every single life was a precious resource. Today, we live in an era of unprecedented safety. We have banished the predators, cured the infections, and extended our lifespans past 80 years. But as you look at your modern life, remember the 20-year horizon of your ancestors. We didn't conquer death because we were the strongest or the fiercest creatures on the savannah. We conquered it because when the world was at its deadliest, we refused to let each other die alone.
If you made it this far, you're not just watching. You're the kind of person who wants to know why. Why we're wired this way. Why the past still runs in the background of everything we do. That's exactly what this channel is for. Subscribing costs nothing. It just tells us to keep digging. See you in the next one.